Shalom, more praise to Yahweh Bashim Shah, double honor to the apostles of GMS. This is Noah Allah coming at you another video. And basically in this video, what I want to get into is the fruit eaten by Adam and Eve. I'm not going to go into, we know what it's talking about. It's talking about a form of knowledge or wicked knowledge. But what we're going to go into is why is it that people assume that it's an apple when the scripture doesn't even say apple? And we're going to give you some history on that, on the significance of apples as to why it's assumed that they ate an apple. So let's get right to it. Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Like I said, I'm not going to break all of these verses down because there's only a certain point I want to get to. So Genesis 3 and 1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Yahweh Bashim Shah had made. You know, the serpent is talking about a man, Esau. Was more subtle meaning skillfully deceitful, than any beast of the field, than any other man on the earth, which the Lord power had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath the Most High said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High saith, matter of fact, let me go right here. Look at that word God in Hebrew real quick. Okay, it says Allahayim, the powers, which means the angels, Yahweh Shah and the angels. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the powers have said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. So the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden. Now when you go to that word fruit, it's parya. It says fruit, produce of the ground, fruit, offspring, children, progeny of the womb, fruit of actions, figurative. So this says fruit, but where did it get an apple from? Let's get into some history on that. When you go to the online etymology website and you look at the word apple, it says apple, noun. Old English, apple, any kind of fruit, fruit in general. From Proto-Germanic, gives a bunch of different languages there. Also Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch, Old Norse, Old High German. And it says apple. So what do we gather from there? Is that the word apple means apple or any kind of fruit in general. So it says fruit in general, but let's read a little bit more. When you scroll down, it says, in Middle English as late as 17th century, it was a generic term, meaning a general term, not specific. It was a generic term for all fruit other than berries, but including nuts. So all fruit other than berries, like cranberries, raspberries, strawberries, for all fruit other than berries, but including nuts, such as finger apple, dates, literally finger apple. So dates, like the fruit called dates, D-A-T-E-S, that literally means finger apples. Middle English, apple of paradis, Paradis, banana. So banana was known as apple of paradis, or like paradise apple, circa 1400. Hence its grafting onto the unnamed fruit of the forbidden tree in Genesis. See right there, hence its grafting onto the unnamed fruit of the forbidden tree in Genesis. Because in Genesis, the fruit that Adam and Eve were forbidden to eat from, the fruit was not named. But it says, hence its grafting into the unnamed fruit of the forbidden tree. In other words, hence its attachment or the association to the unnamed fruit in Genesis. Meaning, fruits at that time, or apples, were known as fruits in general. Since apples were known as fruits in general, meaning it was not necessarily a specific fruit, various fruits were called apples. Since various fruits were called apples, and Adam and Eve were told not to, Adam and Eve had eaten a fruit from the tree, then the association is automatically going to be an apple. Many fruits at one time were known as apples. So if Adam and Eve had eaten the fruit from a tree, it would have had to have been an apple, because at one point in time, all fruits, not including berries, were known as apples. So if Adam and Eve had eaten a fruit, and all fruits around the 17th century were known as apples, then it's only um makes sense that that's what the association will come from. Okay? And the 17th century is the 1600s. From like 1601 to 1700, then from 1701 to 1800 is the 18th century. The 1801 to 1900 is the 19th century. 1901 to the year 2000 is the 20th century, and 2000 to 1 to 2100 is the 21st century. Right now we're in the 21st century. 2000 is 20 centuries, so 2001 will be the beginning of the 21st century. Okay. So it says cucumbers in one Old English work are elpa, el, elpe apla, literally earth apples. And that spelling right there is it's Dutch, if I'm not mistaken, or Old English. Compare French pomme de terre, Pomme space De space Terre. Oh, I don't think I read the whole thing. Cucumbers in the Old English work are elpella, literally earth apples. Compare French pomme de terre, potato, literally earth apple. See also melon. French pomme, Pomme, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, is from Latin pomum, apple fruit. See that right there? Okay, let's get some more. Genesis chapter 30, verse 14. And Reuben went into the days of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field, which Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob and Leah. And he was the firstborn son of all of the 12 tribes, and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. So Rachel said to Leah, Give me of your son's mandrakes. Now what does mandrake mean? Let me pause the video real quick and put my phone on do not disturb, just in case someone calls me. Alright, so and she said unto her, Is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? Because Jacob originally worked to get Rachel from Laban, but Rachel had given him Leah instead. And when he found out he was given Leah, he wasn't really pleased because he wanted Rachel more. He really wanted Rachel, so he continued to work to get Rachel. So Leah is saying, is it a small matter that you taken my husband? You think it's a small thing that you took my husband? Because eventually Jacob continued to work and he got Rachel, and Rachel will conceive children by Jacob. And what is thou also take my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, There he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. So Rachel saying, Give me of your son's mandrakes, and you could lie with Jacob tonight. And eventually she did, and I'll keep reading. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him, and said, Thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. So she had gave the mandrakes that Reuben had gotten during the time of harvest. She had given the mandrakes to Rachel so that she could lay with Jacob. And he lay with her that night, and the Most High hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the fifth son. And Leah said, The Most High hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. But let's look at that word mandrakes. So let's go to Genesis 30 and 16. It's mentioned in a couple of verses. But let's go to this one, since that's the last one that I read. Alright. You look at that word mandrake. In the Hebrew is dawadaya. That's a dawadaya. You look at that word, go down to where it says show outline the biblical usage. What does it say? Mandrake, love apple, an exciting sexual desire, a favoring procreation. So mandrakes, when you look it up, dawadaya, it's love apple. So we see right there fruit We see right there something being associated with an apple. That's not necessarily an apple as we know it. Now here I'm on Google. I typed in Mandrake Fruit and you see the images that popped up? These are the images of Mandrake Fruits. You have Mandrake Fruits, but then you have Mandrake Roots, which is the root of the Mandrake. And Mandrakes are known as love apples. They're also known as May apples or Maya apples. Maya apple. Okay? Because mandrakes are associated with fertility. As a matter of fact, hey, look at this right here. See, look at that. It says some says poisonous. Some say the roots resemble a human body. You see it right there in this image right here. But yeah. So you have the mandrake fruits. You have the root of the mandrake. Alright. So let's go to some more information. This is Songs of Solomon 7 and 12. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine flourish. Whether the tender grape appear and the pomegranates bud forth, they will I give my loves. The mandrakes give a smell. At our gates are all men of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I have laid up for thee, O my beloved. O my beloved. So mandrakes are associated with being, it's said to have an association with fertility and said with being an aphrodisiac. Some say that it isn't true, but it has an association with fertility due to the fact that Rachel had hired, um, due to the fact that Leah had hired Jacob by giving Rachel of her son's mandrakes, and she hired Jacob basically to sleep with him. So that's the association with it. Some sources say the roots of a mandrake resembles a human body. Some say that it doesn't. But you have the mandrake fruit and you have the root that the mandrake fruit is attached to. And when we looked it up, in the Hebrew, is dawadaya, and that word there is love apple. So we see something else being associated with apples. That's not apples as we know it. Here's a website called quickanddirtytips.com. What is that saying about bad apples again? People sometimes seem to forget the second part of the bad apple saying. Let's scroll down. It says, I've been learning, I'm going right to the point. Alright, I've been hearing people talk about bad apples a lot lately, so it seems like a good time to look at this idiom. Idiom, this saying like one bad apple spoils a whole bunch. That's called an idiom or a saying. Alright? What goes around comes around. Those are idioms or sayings. What it means and where it comes from. Along the way, I also found some surprising history about the word apple itself. What do we mean when we talk about a few bad apples? First, we've been hearing about bad apples because it's the way that people try to say a problem isn't widespread. I don't gotta read that part, but we have an idea what that means. Okay, let's go down a little bit. The origin of the bad apples idiom. Sources say that the proverb started with the Chaucer, Chaucr, who in The Cook's Tale had a character say it is better to take the rotten apple out of the bag than to have it rot or the other ones. The Cook's Tale was written sometime between the years 1387 and 1400, but the character who says that line says he is quoting a proverb, so it's likely the same was in use before then. In fact, the Oxford English Dictionary has the earliest English use of rotten apple to mean a bad person who has the potential to corrupt others, appearing in the year 1340 in a book called Ayenbite Inuit, Ayenbite of Inwyt. That book was a commentary on Christian morality, and it was actually a translation from a book written in French that was published in the late 1200s. Let's go down. Alright, here we go. It says, a long time ago, apple was a name for almost any fruit. Next, here's something that will surprise you about the word apple. Originally, It wasn't limited to what we think of as as an apple today. Instead, in Old English, an apple was any round, firm fruit that grew on a tree. For example, it could be what today we call an apple, an orange, or even a pomegranate. So it could be what people call apples today. It could be what people call oranges. It could be what people call pomegranates. They were at one time known as apples. According to Idiom Online, we just read that earlier, in Middle English, apple was a generic term for all fruit other than berries, but including nuts. Dates, dates, were called finger apples, and bananas were called apples of paradise, for example. If you're reading a document from Old English or Middle English, don't assume an apple is what we think of as an apple today. It made me think of words of color, which we talked about a couple of years ago, and how those words also started out covering broad categories and then became more narrow, like how white used to mean what we think of as white today, but it also included the colors gray and yellow and silver. It also like the term redhead. Redheads don't really have red hair. Their hair is really like orange. But what happened was orange didn't become a part of the English language, if I'm not mistaken. Orange did not become part of the English language until oranges were introduced into Europe in the 1500s. All right, but up until prior to that, people who had so-called redhead, people that were so-called redheads, or people who has hair that actually looks orange, they were called redheads because the word orange didn't even exist yet in English. If I must type in words for click on that right there was words for color, so I can make sure I'm exact. I'm just gonna skip right down to the part with redheads. In fact, we call people redheads instead of orange heads because at the time we started calling them anything the word orange had it into the language as a color word, and the word red included the orangey color of red hair. See? Click on that part we call redheads. Why do people call redheads instead of orange heads? But when you go, look right here. Orange, on the other hand, only appears in English after the arrival of the fruits in England. According to Edam Online, again, the term for the fruit shows up around 1300 AD from Italian arancia via Arabic naranj, Naranj, and traces back to Sanskrit naranja s, Naranja meaning orange tree. But orange doesn't start being used in English for the color until the 1500s, approximately 200 years later. See that? What about redhead? It started being said in the mid 1200s, about 100 years before English speakers were even talking about oranges, let alone the color. So at one point in time, the reason why people today call people redheads instead of orange heads because their hair is actually orange is because the word orange wasn't used in English for the color until the 1540s. Okay, so that's an example. If you read something about, if you see a redhead, you know a redhead's hair isn't really red; it's really orange. So when you read something in the Bible and says fruit, people assume it's an apple because during the time period the Bible was written in the King's English in the 1600s under King James. During that time period, apples were known as a wide variety of fruits. So when people saw fruit and they saw it said Adam and Eve ate a fruit, they assumed the fruit was an apple because at that time all fruits were called apples or various fruits were called apples. Let's read some more. This is from says West Germanic all apples. Lemons, melons, pineapples, dates, bananas, cucumbers, they are all apples. At least that was once the case in the Germanic languages. And that explains a lot for both the fruit lover and the Bible reader. Check that out, see? They even mention in the Bible here. Fruits. If you had to sum up the list and at the beginning of this section in one word, you would probably say fruits. The apples not only apply to English but also to other Germanic languages, both West Germanic, Frisian, Dutch, Afrikaans, I spelled Afrikaans, German, and North Germanic, Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic. In English, the word fruit was taken from the French as early as the 12th century, while the French word was derived from Latin fructus, fructus. Dutch also has adopted fruit from French, and also the word vrucht, Vrucht, which is directly derived from Latin. In a similar way, Latin has influenced all Germanic languages except Icelandic when it comes to the collective name for fruit. And it gives you all of these different examples right here. I don't really got to keep reading much because it mentions the finger earth apples thing. As we mentioned before, finger apples being dates, earth apples being cucumbers or potatoes, paradise apples um being bananas. Oh, we read here it says pineapple or pineapple, also from Middle English, developed pineapple, Pineppel, pineapple, pineapple, also from Middle English, developed into pineapple, and could also mean pomegranate. And then there was the meaning pine cone, which was also dennenappel, Dennenappel, or pidgenappel in Dutch, Pijnappel. Frisian used pineapple, Pynappel, for this. Okay. Also, and dinapple, Dinappel. Scroll down a little bit. It says this is a small. It says with the German. Scroll down. It says what German does use is the word paradise Apfel. That is a small, round, wild-growing apple, but can regionally also mean a tomato or pomegranate. In a similar way to Frisian, the word citronappel, Citroenappel, literally lemon apple, was used for a large, elongated, somewhat angular apple, as to indicate a lemon. Same thing here, orange, China's apple. It says the Dutch language seems to agree with me, because under orange apple, Orangeappel, the WNT, you type in WNT, what's WNT? Hard for me to pronounce this, but Woordenboek de Nederlandsk Taal, WOORDNBOEKDRNEDERLANDSCHETALL. That's the WNT. WNT is the world's largest etymological dictionary. Okay? It contains 350,000 to 400,000 entries describing words from 1500 to 1976, and I believe it says the paper edition consists of 43 volumes on 49,255 pages. It is believed to be the largest dictionary in the world in number of pages, and it was said to be 1,500 years in the making as well. But that's WNT, okay? And it's the largest etymological dictionary in the world when you look it up. But it says orange apple. The WNT mentions three meanings: the fruit of a plant family, orange, lemon, lime, the fruit of an orange tree, citrus, communis, riso, and by extension, the orange tree itself. So it meant many things. Okay. Scroll down a little bit. It says I have never encountered the name orange apple on the orange shelf in my life, so the confusion seems to have been resolved in favor of the word sinapple. Sinaassappel. I'm not saying that comes from Snapple. I'm just saying that word Sapple or Snapple or Snappel, Synappel, is Frisian and Apfelsin in German. Comes from China's apple, which is China's apple because it was a fruit that came from China. So you got terms called Chinese apples too. Okay. I could read a little bit more. It talks about forbidden fruit and all of that, but we know they say the Adam's apple because they say the Adam's apple, that's a piece of the apple that got stuck in the throat and all of that. But you know that that's not true. And it's word right here highlighted on your screen, Sinappel, that I was mentioning earlier, Sinaassappel. That's known as Chinese apple. If you type in Chinese apple, it's known as like an orange. An orange is called like a Chinese apple. You got mandarin oranges. You got all different types of stuff. So these different fruits were known as apples. And it's the last thing I'm going to read. It says, what about apples? Apples are not apples. An immediate apology if some of this seems tangled. I'm sorry, but I couldn't get into the apple pie order. Well, we don't gotta read this, but same thing. Basically the same thing that we didn't read. You know, ancient. It says ancient apples. Maybe we didn't learn in school that pomace is Latin for apple. It isn't. Not quite, or not necessarily. It meant any fruit tree. Type of fruit not specified, but once again, fruits are known as apples, so it's understanding that people would say pomace means apple or fruit because fruits were known as apples. Various fruits were known as apples. Love apples. These are not apples but tomatoes when that fruit first reached Britain. So that's basically the point. You know what I'm saying? That's basically the point. Thorn apples. You know, these are Datura stramonum. But you know, that's the gist of it. You know, that's the gist of it. This is from what about apples and not apples. So that's basically it. That's basically it, brothers. You know, just to give you some significance of why the fruit that Adam and Eve ate was called an apple, even though it's not even mentioned there, is because up until the 17th century, all fruits, excluding berries, but including nuts, were known as apples. So if Adam and Eve had eaten a fruit off of a tree, the assumption is going to be that it's an apple because fruits during the time when the Bible was written in the Old English were known as apples. Fruits generally were known as apples at that time. So with that, I'm going to close. This is from some Facebook page, a public Facebook page, so you don't got to be a member to just see this. So with that, I'm going to close and say, oh, praise Yahweh, Shema Shah, double line, see Apostle GMS. I hope brothers learned something. Shalom.